GC Rad 1 here, Yamaha TDUB Club, and today I'm going to ask you, is this right or is this wrong? No, we're not going to talk about the Shinko 241. What we're going to talk about is your valve stem. Specifically, what we're going to talk about is the Honda 42714 KA3-710 cap valve. The technical name. Yes, we're going to talk about a Honda part, even though this is the Yamaha TDUB Club. And why are we going to talk about this relatively small part? Yes, we're talking about a valve cap. There's a lot of reasons to talk about this because Honda's the only one that makes this. Honda's the only one that uses this. But if you see right here the way I'm using it, it's a workaround. And I learned this while hanging out at Gustin Motorsports. Basically, the whole idea behind this rubber grommet is that the rubber grommet sits between the valve cap and the rim. And what it allows to happen is if your tube does spin in the tire, instead of just ripping it out because everyone has the nut on the valve stem cranked all the way down, so if it moves or if the tube moves, that valve stem is going to stay in one place, and the only thing that's going to happen is it's going to rip at the valve stem head where it goes into the tube. So working at Gustin Motorsports, we learned this little trick in that instead of running the nut all the way down to the rim, you run it all the way up to the cap, and that way if the tube does move, it has that space to suck down in there. And I asked, why don't you just run these caps from Honda and just order these and put them on? And there's the additional cost, but this way, black valve stem, cap, black rim, having the silver valve stem itself is a little bit more visible, so you can quickly look at the wheel and see if the valve stem is getting pulled down in there to angle or anything. So with that, I actually called JCR, and hopefully you know JCR. Maybe you don't know JCR, but JCR is a company started by Johnny Campbell. He's a big-time Honda motorcycle racer and team director. He's had multiple wins at Baja. If you recently saw the Honda effort at the Dakar Rally with Ricky Brabec, Monster Energy released a Brabec special, and they spoke about Johnny Campbell training these new guys for the Honda rally team. So I called them and asked about this little particular part from Honda, and they said yes, that's what it's exactly for, but they're no longer running tubes in their race efforts, you know, because they're all on bib mooses now. But he did say I have a 2021 450R rally bike in the shop, and it does come with the rubber grommet. So Honda's still using it, and it's there for a purpose. Basically what Graham has done over at Gustin Motorsports is on all the bikes that go out from his shop with a race prep. Let's talk about that for a second. When a bike comes in for a race prep at Gustin Motorsports, there's a whole sequence of items that happen. But in the wheels particular, we check the spoke tension with a spoke torque wrench. We set the tires to 15 PSI front and rear, because most of these guys are racing motocross at a track. And yeah, that's a low pressure when you look at that in comparison to the TW or any other dual sport street going bike. So those guys will get wheel slippage even with rim locks just to try to hold the tire in place on the rim. And yeah, we're talking front and rear that you do this, because with as much force as guys are going on the throttle off the back wheel out of the corner, coming into the corner, these guys are like hard on the front brake. Probably 80-90% of their stopping is done with the front brake into the corners. So it's kind of like the reverse of the rear wheel. We've seen front wheels slide or slip or spin on the rim due to the amount of braking force going into the turn. So there's that possibility of the valve stem ripping there as well. So we tighten the spokes, check the air pressure, and chuck up the nut to the top of the cap to allow for that little, you know, slippage. If it does pull, it's going to pull down in there some, but it's not going to tear the core out of the tube. Okay? Basic. Just little tricks. Does this apply to T-dubbing? Yes and no, because you could be running your bike down to 5 and 8 PSI, getting some good traction. It only takes that one particular grippy rock, applying the throttle, the right weight, and you get a little bit of slippage. It could be all the difference in making the ride for the rest of the day or not. It's just one of those minute little trick that they did in order to simulate what effect the rubber valve cap from the Honda is doing. And again, this is a spacer that goes between the twist-on valve cap, even though Honda's technical, you know, when you look at the part number and the description, it is a valve cap, but it's the piece in between the actual screw-on cap and the rim, and it doesn't go under the rim. It goes between the rim and the cap on the outside. And again, what it does is it allows for the valve stem to pull down just a little bit if ever there's the need. Hopefully you don't run into that need. And for me, it's just something that I do on here because once you learn about it and you are knowledgeable of it, it's just that one thing that you're looking for to give yourself the advantage if ever this situation ever became this situation. And on the T-Dub, I'm probably doing 90 to 95% of all of my braking with the front brake. So I have the front wheel set up this way as well as the rear wheel, just for that peace of mind. I don't know. That's just my little tip, just a little piece of knowledge, just trying to spread the knowledge. Okay, quick note, since we have the front wheel off, the bike now has 9,600 miles on it, and I'd have to go and look up and see how many miles it had when I replaced the front fork fluid. So since the wheel's off, we're halfway there. I may as well do a front fork reflush fluid change. What do you want to call it? Fluid refresh. So yeah, that'll be the next video. I will go through the process of how easy it really is to replace your front fork fluid. And why do you want to replace your front fork fluid? Front fork fluid. There is no rear fork, so it's just a fork fluid. Fork fluid. We're gonna replace fork fluid in the front fork. All right, so yeah, next video will be fluid replacement for the fork of the TW200. But let's go back. Why? Well, one, I have built suspension in the front end. I ride the bike probably harder than it's supposed to be ridden. Therefore, that fluid breaks down a lot faster. The suspension itself is only 6 inches of travel, so there's a lot of movement. It doesn't have 14 inches of travel. So these front forks, they're working. The springs are in there, and that aeration in the oil, the heat and aeration, it breaks the oil down. And they say, I think roughly once a year, since I'm coming up on the 10,000 mile maintenance service schedule, I'm probably going to take a look at all of that and start picking off all the things that need to happen at a 10,000 mile service. But I do know that forks need it already. Next video coming up. All right.